come on. So we are finishing right now today a 4-week series exploring the science of mind, New Thought teachings. Thank you. Found in the classic movie, The Wizard of Oz. So today we conclude our trip over the rainbow and bring it all home. Because we're bringing it home today. As we look at the concept that there really is no place like home. There really is no place like home. But before we do this, I have a few, I thought this was really cool. I have a few trivia questions for you about the Wizard of Oz, and we'll see who can answer them. What was the name of the horse that drew the carriage that Dorothy and the gang rode in when they first arrived in Oz? Who knows that?
Trigger.
That's a hard one. Sylvester. We're going to see the movie today, so now we can look at all of these
We'll be able to trick us on that next time.
Where else did this horse appear in the movie before? It appeared in the movie at another time.
Pulling the plow?
In Kansas. Yes, very good. But he was pulling, he belonged to Professor Marvel.
Oh.
And what song was cut from the movie and then resurrected from the cutting room floor?
Over the rainbow.
Over the Rainbow. Why was it originally cut?
Too long.
It was too long and they thought it would slow the movie down. Exactly. Can you imagine that? Who was, you might know this one, who was originally cast as the Tin Man?
Buddy Epson.
Stars! Okay. We were supposed to have chocolates to give out, but I didn't. Why was he replaced?
He was allergic to the makeup.
Oh.
Yeah.
He was too tall. He got lead poisoning from the suit. So,
That makes
kind of.
sense.
Wow. So he was, in fact, allergic to the tin makeup. Yes. What was, now people have said this before, so I know. Oh, wait a minute, there's more. How many scenes were the Wizard and the Good Witch of the North in together?
Two.
None.
Trick question.
And you know what? You'll find out a little bit later why. What was the original color of the ruby slippers?
Blue.
Silver. Someone had said that once before. Silver, yeah. And why was that color changed?
Because red is prettier.
Actually, yeah. The red would show up better on the screen. Thank gosh. Thank God. Okay, so how did the author, this is interesting, Frank Baum, come up with the name of this land, Oz? Do you know it?
Yeah.
Go!
I think he was looking at a file cabinet,
Right.
and it said O-Z, so we said
I am so impressed.
That's
That's exactly right.
I
He
was
was
reading the
reading.
morning news.
Right.
Dorothy's gingham dress just sold for $480,000.
This is one of the questions. Okay. So there you have it. That's a little trivia about the Wizard of Oz. So today we're going to look at the idea that there really is no place like home. And T.S. Eliot once wrote these wonderful lines. We shall not cease from exploration, and the end of all our exploring will be to arrive where we started and to know the place for the first time. What does that really mean? Well, the story of Dorothy is really going to show us very, very clearly what that means. From the beginning of the story, even before Dorothy goes on her adventure over the rainbow, she's still looking for this place called home. She's looking, even before she goes over the rainbow, she's looking for the place called home. Now, obviously, we don't mean her physical home because she had one in Kansas, but something wasn't right in her life. Something wasn't right in her life. She doesn't really know the place, to use T.S. Eliot's phrase. She really didn't know the place. So she isn't happy, she isn't fulfilled, satisfied, or loved. She was pretty unhappy, actually, before, you know, it was all black and white. She's ignored by Auntie Em and Uncle Henry and by just about everyone else. There is no caring going on about what happens to Dorothy. She feels it. And she's gotten herself into trouble with the law. Well, not really her, the dog, Toto. Toto's got her in trouble with the law. So, you know, that was another thing that was kind of like, when we talked about it, it was Dorothy's ploy for attention, just to get some attention. Somebody knew that she existed. So Dorothy sets everything up so she isn't home, even though she really is home. Does that sound familiar? You ever feel like you're living in a physical place, but something's missing, you don't feel at home?
Yes.
Okay. A few of us might have had that experience. So from a metaphysical interpretation then, she doesn't know who she is. Right? She doesn't know who she is. She's not connected to her inner home, to that God spark that we've been speaking about, to that divine potential for goodness and greatness that is what the ruby slippers represented last week. And she isn't awake or aware to who she really is. She's lost God. Not that you can really lose God, but it can feel that way sometime. And I actually remembered a time, you know, in my life, like many years ago, when I had that same feeling, and maybe you can relate to that, where, you know, everything, you're in a home, you're in a place, and everything looks all full and nice and wonderful, but something is missing, and you can feel that something that's missing. And I called it like my God hole. It felt this emptiness that I wanted to fill up, and I didn't know how to fill it up. And material stuff doesn't fill that God hole up. Doesn't fill it up. Trust me, I love to shop. It doesn't fill it up. It doesn't. But,
Sorry.
and I know that many people here have had the same experience, and that's why we're in community. That's why we're in community, and that we align ourselves with these spiritual truths. That's why it's so important to me that these classes really teach spiritual truths, and that we can understand them and use them, because they are our tool belt for life. They will bring us home. They will help us to ignite that God spark within. And it's so vital, it's so enriching, it's so fulfilling. You cannot live a fulfilling, successful, glorious life unless you've connected with that indwelling life, that eternal self, that will guide, that will love unconditionally. And so Dorothy goes looking for this home outside of herself. When she's in Kansas, she looks for it by running after everyone on the farm. She's always like looking for attention, someone to pay attention to her. And she runs away and meets up with that Professor Marble. Remember Professor Marble? Let's give a movie today. The Carney, he's a Carney that she meets up with. And this is really interesting. Remember if you remember the crystal ball experience with him, she decides to go back to her physical home, but she goes back in a lot of fear. And her fear is about Auntie Em. She's already run away from home, so she's in trouble with Auntie Em. But it's also about the storm that is brewing, because the skies are getting really dark and ominous. And what does she find when she gets home? She finds that she is even further away from going home than she was before she left. The doors were closed. The doors were closed. So as these doors to the cellar were closed, it symbolizes her fear has moved even further away from, she has moved even further away from knowing who she really is. She has no idea, and she does not feel the love. She feels estranged. She feels left out, and she's in the storm, seemingly all alone. So her exploration then continues, this time as a journey to Oz. And Dorothy, once again, is looking outside. She's looking outside. Out of conditions, looking outside. Oh, Jeannie, I love your hat. Sorry, but I just looked. Jeannie has, for the Wizard of Oz, she designed a hat. Thank you very much for that. We have fans of this series of talk. Thank you, that looks really cool. Anyway, going back. So Dorothy, once again, she's looking outside of herself, trying to get back home. And this is such a pointed lesson, because it might show us how we go from one experience to another, and that same familiar feeling keeps showing up. The situation might look different, but that feeling within is still the same. So that perhaps this time we'll get this message that our soul is trying to give us something. Our soul is trying to give us something when we become aware of that, when we wake up to that. But that's the patterns that we talk about from these added conditions that we find ourselves in, repeating over and over again until we do wake up, until we too do become aware of what? We are always in the process of awakening. We are always in the process of awakening. And every event in our life has the potential to serve as a catalyst for that awakening. Let's look for the lesson in every single experience, because there is always a lesson if we look. But if we don't, then we get to have more and more of these similar experiences, and perhaps the next time ours will be in Technicolor and bright colors, and we sometimes don't want that, because it doesn't mean it's always good. She was in Oz and everything was colorful and beautiful, but she was still looking and searching and collecting people that were looking and searching with her. So in Oz, Dorothy still doesn't wake up. She still is looking, and she looks to a pretty shady character at the end part. The wizard is supposed to be like, this great guru, though this is the wizard now, to take her home. He's going to save her, right? We look to other people as our gurus to save us, to show us the way, to give us the information so we'll be okay and everything will be fine in the world. But she continues to look to him even after that little Toto, because the animals are so wise, reveals that he's a charlatan. He's a fraud. He's not real. She thinks that the wizard will get her home. The wizard promises to take her back to Kansas in his hot air balloon. It was a big hot air balloon. But only after the balloon takes off, without Dorothy, does the wizard reveal that he doesn't know how to even work it. Doesn't even know. So in Kansas, Dorothy is looking outside of herself for home. In Oz, she's still looking outside of herself for home. But when Glinda tells her, you've always had the power to go back to Kansas, when she tells her that, in that moment, there is like a glimmer of awakening taking place within Dorothy. So Dorothy just starts to, a little shift in perception. That's what awakening feels like, a little shift. And she begins to do a very important thing. She begins to trust her power. Trust her power. Do we trust? Do we even have power? Do we trust? The trusting part is key. Her own inner spark, her innate goodness, her potential for greatness, which we all have in us, begin to trust that. She's beginning at this point now to trust that. It's going to shift everything, change everything. In that moment, she begins to find within herself, and she begins to know for the first time that possibly there's something with home within her. So she's moving into that. When we first wake up, when we first discover, there's a whole different way of thinking, of being in this world, of dealing with these circumstances, these situations in life. When we realize that we have choice, and then trust in that. Trust in the power of our choice, and choose for good. Choose for good. But she doesn't go home yet. Dorothy doesn't go home yet. She has something very important to still do. She has to stop and say goodbye to all of her new friends that she made, right? Her companions Perhaps it is a little bit, there's so much metaphysical meaning in this movie, a little bit more than just saying goodbye. Perhaps in those sweet, intimate moments in the movie where she has the connection with the Scarecrow, the Lion, and the Tin Man, the one she'll miss the most, she whispered to him, she wasn't just saying goodbye. Perhaps she was integrating the qualities that they represented into her, integrating those qualities. She told each of them she could never have done this without them. And that's right. Remember that the Scarecrow represents divine intelligence. Remember? Divine intelligence for the brain. And the Tin Man, unconditional love. Unconditional love. And the Lion, courage and power. Courage and power. So these are our infinite qualities of God within each and every one of us. We are each and every one of us filled with, if we would trust it and know it and recognize it, we are trusted with an intelligence beyond comprehension. We are empowered with a love that is unconditional. Spirit loves us without conditions, and we have the power and the greatness, we have the courage to express our greatness if we but trust it, if we but trust in that innate God within to guide us, to pull us out, to allow us to live this life in peace, in well-being. We begin then. The Science of Mind teachings is so powerful, and it's New Thought. So it runs through all of the New Thought spiritualities that are around the unity and religious science, and there are so many others, but it's one truth, one basic truth, that God is all there is. When we move into that truth, that God is all there is, and that we are not separate from it, that's when we really connect with going home. That's when we finally actually start to arrive at home, because home is within that divine, eternal essence that is the truth of our being. So, to awaken to our true selves, to go home, there is an integration of this divine intelligence, this divine love, and this divine courage. There is an integration of all three. So these three characters in The Wizard of Oz to Dorothy represent parts of herself, and they represent to us parts of ourselves that are key for us to deepen into and connect with. To put a spiritual spin on it, in these moments, Dorothy finds God, who, by the way, was hanging around there the whole time. Remember God? Who was God? God was in the pink bubble. It was floating around and coming in and out and always reminding Dorothy of the truth every once in a while. God was always there in that pink bubble. So she then moves into feeling God, seeing God, the God that is closer to her than her hands and feet, nearer to her than her breath, as Holmes would say. Glinda explains that she did not share this truth with Dorothy before because Dorothy never would have believed it. She wouldn't have believed it. She had to learn it for herself. She had to learn it. We all have to learn it. Nobody can put it into you. Nobody can put it into you. We can come at it all different ways of explaining it, of bringing it in, but until we awaken to our own divine essence and the truth of our being, nobody can fill it up. So don't believe that you can go somewhere and someone's going to make you all better, make you all. You've got to do the work within. It's always up to us to do the work on our consciousness, on our awareness, for ourselves, and that contributes to the healing of the whole, the healing of the unity of the oneness of God. So if you remember last week, the ruby slipper lessons were, one of the big lessons that came out of that is we are let alone, not left alone. This is not a God that left us alone. God always has our back, remember? So God is always present, but let us alone to make choices. Always to choose. We get to choose. We have free will. And just to expand for a moment on that idea from last week, self-awareness cannot really be taught. It must be gained from experience. That's why we're having this human experience. So as the Zen poet Jeremy Wolfe so eloquently wrote, experience isn't the best teacher, it's the only teacher. It's how we learn. We learn from experience. Holmes writes, to take it a step further, but he says, it's not just experience, but bitter experience that is often our teacher. We give intelligence outlet either by pure inspiration and intuition or by the way of bitter experience, and with most of us, it is through the latter. Dorothy certainly went through a lot of bitter experiences. Maybe you've been through a couple of what felt like bitter experiences. But that's the opportunity to grow and to learn if we use these spiritual tools and stay in the awareness. There is a lesson here for me. You will most definitely get a lesson from it. I've used it many times, and you will. By asking that question, you will. And maybe not right then, but at some point you will get an answer to that, and it will help you along on a spiritual journey. Back within, as we started out, back within, full circle. So after her awakening came, the integration came through her experiences, and then one thing remained to take her home, and that was the need to trust. So we're always going to have to go back to that thing of trust, even when things don't look good or right or the way we think they should, to trust. So to trust that she had to have the ability to go home, and she needed to activate that trust by clicking her heels. Remember, she clicked her heels. Powerful metaphysical statement for us. We need to trust that we are divine. We are divine beings. And we need to trust that there is a divine law that is always working for our good. If we believe it, remember the law of God, which is God, can only give us what we put into it. So what are you putting into the law? Put it into the law what you want, and then trust that it is already taking place. She needed to trust that she had the ability to go home, and to trust that she needed to activate that trust by the clicking of those heels. So Ernest Holmes wrote, we should be careful not to divide our mental house against itself. Having announced the law of liberty, freedom, we must not deny it. Sometimes we're in a good space and we just talk about how free and how loving and how great everything is, and then we move off into thinking the opposite, which nullifies and voids out the very thing that we might have been praying for. So this is always, and I use the word mind check, time to go within. What are you thinking? Because you're creating by your thought. What are you feeling? You're creating by your emotion, by what you're feeling. Remember that. We are creative beings. Going home and knowing the place for the first time takes trust. It takes some trust. It takes an integration of love, intelligence, and power. Those three qualities. And it takes an awareness of our inner spark, our innate goodness and greatness, to believe that we have this inner spark and that there is a greatness within us that is wanting to unfold and express itself. Going home is about walking that spiritual path of self-discovery. Following the yellow brick road to discover that inner spark. And Holmes also wrote, we will deliver ourselves from sickness and trouble in exact proportion to our discovery of ourselves and our true relationship to the whole. So what I want to do right now is just take you on a very brief little guided meditation. And so I invite you to just take a breath and close your eyes if you're comfortable. And just take a really deep breath, and I want you to consciously breathe in love. Think of love and just breathe it in. And on the exhale, Let go of all fear. And breathe in intelligence. And exhale any idea of less than. Any idea of less than. And I want you to think of a challenge you might be experiencing right now in your life. And know that this experience is an outer experience. It's outer. And take another breath, really deep breath. And feel yourself go within. Breathe into and from the heart. Go into that place of infinite love that is in the heart center, in that chakra, pure, infinite love. And feel connected. Feel connected to the divine love. And just let it flow. Maybe there's a little movement around the heart. Just let it expand a little. Flow. And just see your challenge saturated by this healing love. Never condition. Knowing that all conditions are fleeting. They never stay. They always change. There is no power in conditions. Conditions in our lives are powerless over us and are changing all of the time. Infinite intelligence which resides within each and every one guides you to perfect resolution, to new cause in this realm of cause and effect, these laws of cause and effect. Conditions are effect. Cause is the new idea. And with that, there are infinite possibilities always available to each and every one. Each experience contributes to your spiritual growth and your expansion. So stay within, allowing your awareness of this power within to deepen. And know that all you ever need or desire begins with your recognition of a perfect power of goodness itself. And this is the recognition of your true self. Going home means going within. Communicating with that divine essence. Allowing this infinite, indwelling love, intelligence, and power to guide every thought, every emotion, and every action. The ruby slippers, think of ruby slippers, reminding you of the God spark, your God spark, and the greatness of who you really are, waiting to be ignited by your recognition of it. Allow yourself to let go and trust in the love that is within, to guide and to sustain your every need. And so we breathe once more in and through our hearts. And as we do, we see this beautiful pink bubble come into view. Gorgeous pink bubble. And it fills you with great peace. And as it comes closer and closer, it envelops you with its beauty and its message. You knew it all the time You've always had the power. There is no place like home. There is no place like home. There is no place like home. And I'd like to have everybody say that with me 3 times. There is no place like home. There is no place like home.